Hey everyone, and welcome back to Crescendo, the show where we explore the journey experts take to find their entrepreneurial voices. I'm your host, Rachel Lipchansky, and I'm thrilled to be back today and bring you another inspiring conversation. My guest is Justine Friedman, a registered clinical dietitian and mindset mentor who has dedicated more than 2 decades to helping busy women over 40 nourish their bodies and transform their relationships with food. Justine started her private practice in 2002, but despite her expertise, she kept her business small for many years. In today's episode, we'll dive into how Justine, who's a naturally private person, faced the challenge of stepping into new marketing efforts that pushed her outside her comfort zone. You'll hear how she worked through fears and discomfort to embrace her authentic voice and deliver her message with confidence. From the lessons she learned about herself to the power of showing up authentically, Justine shares the personal transformation that led her to reach and serve her audience in meaningful ways. All right, are you ready? Let's jump right in. Justine, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I've heard a few of your other interviews with some of the other ladies. I'm really excited to be with you today.
Oh, yay. Okay, so before we dive in, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background and what you do?
Okay, so I have been working as a clinical dietitian for, 24 years now. And over the years, so let me give you a little bit more background. So I graduated from the University of Cape Town, which is in Cape Town, South Africa, which is an amazing place to study. The 2 years honors degree that I did in nutrition and dietetics was a medical honors, which really intrigued me a lot more than doing a basic BSc or a shorter course in nutrition, because it really gave me a lot of foundation to be able to understand the effect of nutrition more also medically than just your normal standard weight loss, which of course is something that always comes in. So once I qualified, I worked for another dietitian for a few years and then decided that it was time to open my own practice. So since about March 2002, I've run my own private practice, which has been incredible. And over the years, I've just evolved in how I work and the people that I'm focusing on working with. And I would say in the last 10 years, what has really been important for me is to add on very heavily the mindset aspect to the work that I do, because I believe that no matter how perfect an eating plan I could ever give a client or a patient, if they weren't able to implement it, if they weren't in the right mindset, if they were struggling with certain challenges, either with implementation or stresses in their life, then we all know that the minute that something stressful starts happening, generally our eating is what goes out of whack first. So I really believe that no matter what we are experiencing in life, you can always show up for yourself and make the most nourishing choices possible. And that is why I started implementing so much more of the mindset work with my clients, because that is really what helps them to stay focused and help themselves when they're going through difficult times as well.
That's great. So how did you get into nutrition? You took us back to college. Like what made you go into this field to begin with?
Okay, so there's a long history when it comes to that. So at the age of 13, I became aware of my weight for the first time, as I'm sure many women who are listening to your podcast will understand. In teenage years, all of a sudden your body starts developing and you realize that there's more to your body than just the fact that you have arms and legs. And I was weighed in gym class. They lined all of us up, both girls and boys, and they weighed us one after one and took our heights. And it was purely from a Ministry of Health, approach in order to make sure that everyone was healthy. But it was a trigger for me that created a very bad relationship with my body afterwards. My weight was completely normal, but the reason that it was such a trigger for me was because I got on the scale and the number stared back at me. I think it was 48. And a friend of mine got on after me. I'm speaking about kilos. And she weighed 47. And I looked at that And for the first time, I compared myself to what somebody else was. And I felt like I was less than because she weighed a little bit less than me. And went on my first diet, which I really didn't need to. And of course, I lost weight easily, but it was very hard to sustain that. And I got into a cycle of restricting myself and then not being able to maintain it. And then overeating and binging and eating in secret as a result, because it was just, of course, I needed the nutrition. Of course, my body needed the energy. And eventually, after seeing dietitians and nutritionists myself, I realized that this was something I really wanted to heal and not necessarily rely on an outside source for. And that is really what spurred me to go into the field of nutrition and dietetics, was more because of my own challenges and my own difficulties with my relationship with food.
Wow, that's a really powerful story. And as you were saying that, I actually went back like what, 35 years or something to gym class. They did the same thing in St. Louis, which is where I'm from. I don't know who came up with that like around the world, we should weigh children in front of each other. And do you remember they used to use that machine, that like little, that instrument that like takes your fat, and they would like tell you your BMI or whatever, and they would pinch your arm like in front of everybody. And I was actually always pretty small, but I remember even feeling for some of the other kids in the class at that point.
That's interesting. We
Wow.
never had that. We never had that machine, but just being weighed and me comparing myself to somebody else was enough to do the damage. It's interesting because my daughter is at school here in Israel now, and when they do health checks, they give you the option of whether you want to be, consent or not. And I do, I understand where they're coming from, and I do believe that it's important that we keep a check on health parameters, but to do it in a way that is more positive and not potentially going to create such problems. It could have gone either way. There were girls in my year who developed anorexia, and I have no doubt that it was all from just this body image awareness that started happening. So there's so many different aspects to this that we really need to be aware of.
Absolutely. So, the premise of Crescendo, this podcast, is really about finding our voices. And one of the stories that I actually haven't shared yet on this podcast is that I struggled with my own eating disorders. I was actually hospitalized for eating disorders when I was in ninth grade, and I think that that's just such a pivotal point in a, I was going to say in a girl's life, but the truth is that boys also do, maybe on a lower percentage of boys, but they also do have challenges in this area with food and body issues and things like that. And then, you and I, like looking forward now, right? 20, 30 years later, here we find ourselves in the midst of this social media world, right? Where we have to market our businesses. And so I want to get into that and what came up for you when you started realizing that you had to take this expertise in nutrition to the masses, right? You had to find a way to bring people into what you were doing and helping people and making sales. So tell us a little bit about what that looked like.
So that's a very fascinating journey for me. First of all, until I moved to Israel, or I made Aliyah 4.5 years ago, I never had to market my business. Where I was working in South Africa was in a private medical center, and I had a steady stream of referrals, which I was so grateful for, from the doctors and psychologists and other medical professionals who work there. So coming to Israel was a whole new world for me. And I thought, well, I'm arriving and everyone's just going to know that I offer value and will send people to me. And of course, that was not the case. And it was a very challenging experience for me to put myself out there on social media when I am generally a more private person, and really be able to be loud and clear about the message that I want to give to other women. There is a huge noise on social media about diets, about nutrition, about exercise. And sometimes it does feel like you're being drowned out in the crowd. There's so many, I think first of all, being interested in the field and working in the field, there's so much that comes up on my feed all the time about, different diets and different weight loss, things that you can do in order to, and it's very difficult to know that when you are speaking against that, when you are encouraging people to move away from, as I do, a dieting approach to one of more mindful eating and really getting in touch and understanding your own unique body, really understanding the right nutrition for you. In fact, I put a post out today all about how important it is to not define yourself according to a certain diet, but rather find the foods that are right for you. So it's interesting because there are a lot of other dietitians and nutritionists who are moving into the space as well, of moving away from a dieting approach and really encouraging women to be able to include a variety of foods and not fear foods. But of course, with that comes the natural inclination that we have, where we believe that the only way to get to our weight goals is through dieting. So it really has been a deep inner work for me to be able to know that I'm offering value and I'm putting that out there to the world. And I really try my best to be as authentic as possible in my posts. And even though, you look at the numbers and you see what, some people's posts are getting for things that you don't feel are as valuable, but I really feel that eventually the right people will see the message that I'm giving out there and will come to me for that. And the truth is that it is happening. So there was a lot for me to learn, about social media and the algorithm. And I've done courses in order to be able to understand all of that better and to up level that for myself. And now I have assistance. I can't do it all myself. And I've reached out for help with that. So I have a social media company that's working with me on that.
That's great. This is really important. So I want to ask you a little bit more about this. But, when we have that tendency to stay small and feel like our messages are being drowned out on social media or wherever we might be showing up in our marketing, do you have any tips for how you keep going?
Wow. So it's interesting because I attended the NAS summit a week ago, and one of the main messages that they were giving was about just consistently showing up and making sure that you are being authentic. I think one of the main messages that Nuseria Sen, who's the owner of Nest Daily, was saying that the first video he ever put out, I think he spent $200 a day on advertising for almost a 2-year period before he found any traction, which I don't know how he managed to show up daily and be able to do that and invest so much. For me, I just firmly believe that you have to be consistent. And I think with that can also come a little bit of pressure. Like, if I haven't posted today, am I missing out? Am I not matching the algorithm? If you're not top of mind when somebody's searching for a dietitian or searching for something in your own profession, does that mean that you're not going to be the first person that they call? I think you have to also have so much faith in your business, in yourself, that the right message that you're putting out will reach the right person. And I think there are different ways of approaching this whole social media storm. And networking is a big part of that. And I think also, and this is where I'm moving a lot more towards, is nurturing my audience who are on my email lists as well, because I think that is where your ability to engage with people on a slightly more personal level is possible, because people have very, very short attention spans when it comes to social media. I find it even with myself. If somebody's written a really, really long post, I find myself skimming it, and they could have the most incredible and powerful message there. So I think for me in particular, and in the past, I used to write long, long, long posts. I try and move away from that. I try to make it very bold, simple, as straightforward as possible, and have an engaging image that also draws them in, so that my message is consistent, but also isn't taking a long time for the viewer to engage with. And as much as video is really important, there are times that I am happier to do video content. And there are other times where I also shrink back a little bit into myself and I don't really feel like it. Do I look okay today? Is my makeup okay? On a day that you're feeling good and I've dressed up and I've got my hair right and I've got my makeup right, then I'll, quickly batch recorded a number of different videos. Like, for example, it's Shavuot in a few days. And about 3 weeks ago, I batch recorded a few short videos in order for my social media people to be able to upload that. But I can't do it on a daily basis. So I think it's also about understanding what your capacity is and working to some kind of a schedule and having a goal in mind and a message in mind that you're consistently putting out there.
Yeah, it's so good. So you mentioned a bunch of different things. I mean, clear, concise, pretty straightforward, because I think as a human species, our attention span has just been reduced so dramatically in the last probably 10 to 15 years. Also, this piece about showing up when you feel like it cannot be overstated. I think that there's so much pressure to, as you said, create videos, and because that's what the algorithms prefer and show preferential treatment to in terms of visibility and so forth. But at the end of the day, we are humans, and we I believe have to run our businesses in a way that really works for us first, as opposed to like selling our soul to the algorithms and the shoulds, right? And so I think that this is a really important thing for people to hear from you, is that you can do this and you can build that visibility with consistency. But on those days where you don't feel like doing that, or when you do and you can batch, right, you can really get a lot of create content like in those times that feel good for you, as opposed to really forcing yourself to do something in moments that just aren't going to feel good for you. I also just think that then we don't show up as our best selves.
Absolutely. So it's
So the
interesting.
message is like lost anyway.
Totally. My son, who's almost 19, is pushing me to do TikTok reels and TikTok videos. And he keeps sending me examples of other nutritionists and dietitians who speak a similar language to me, who are giving a similar message over. And it's so overwhelming for me. It's so overwhelming for me to think about going onto another platform. And I do post on TikTok now and again, but I'm not consistent enough there. And again, like, that's the other message. Like, choose the platforms that you believe are where your audience is and show up there. I think, and this is something else for me, is like, even though I'm a dietitian and people expect that I'm going to be showing them food and talking about food all day long and, showing them how to make meals, and that's not what I'm passionate about. I'm far more passionate about speaking to people about healing their relationship with food, about really connecting within themselves and leaving dieting behind, and how to be able to do that. So that, again, is part of like the message I think that you're also trying to put across, is that authenticity is incredibly important, because people can see on a social media post when something is not, when you're not showing up for your own message. And with that is another very important message, and this is something that I'm learning as well, is to have for people to have trust in your brand, you have to show up consistently as who you are and not flip-flop from one thing to another. And I think in the beginning, I certainly was jumping from different things because it was whatever was inspiring me on the day. But I think that consistency also breeds brand trust. And when people can, we know the phrase is that people need to know who you are, like you, and trust you before they're going to click and go book an appointment or buy a product. So it's very, very important that that also comes across. And I think for women also to realize that moving away from the shoulds, even though maybe that's where people are getting a lot of views and a lot of engagement, does not, for me, it makes me so anxious to think about going out there and choosing something else to focus on. Really, for me, important is that we stick to what we know is working. And I know where my people are. My people are generally more on Facebook. They are more on LinkedIn. I show up on Instagram and I do get some engagement, but that's not really where my people are. Or maybe I haven't got the algorithm right there yet. I don't know.
Yeah, this is so many good points here. As you are talking, I'm just thinking like, do you have a memorable moment in your business when things shifted for you? Like when you felt like, oh, I figured this out, right? I don't have to keep pushing what appears to be maybe somebody else's marketing agenda. But really finding yourself within your business and then using your voice and feeling like you can, get out there with this newfound self-belief.
So I think there've been a number of different points, and it's come as I have learned more about promoting my business. So the first time I ever did a social media course, which was wonderful and offered to us as a new immigrants to Israel, was through an organization called Mati. And I think it was a 12-week course, if I'm not, maybe it's a 6-week course. I think there were 12 sessions within 6 weeks. And when I started using Canva and being able to realize that I could create my own images there and put my message across, it was like a whole new world opened up for me. I absolutely loved it. The next tool that I was excited about discovering was Descript, where I could take a whole webinar that I'd created and dump it into Descript and take out short clips from it that were now powerful messages that people didn't have to watch this long, talk, or, as we said, people have very short attention spans. So I could grab somebody with a 2 or 3 minute clip that was really powerful. They got my message across. So that was great. Then 2 years ago, I started working with a company in Canada in order to build an online program. And I ran the online program twice live, and I'm now in the process of creating it into more of an evergreen model. And I'm working out the kinks of what really will be the most effective for the women who come into that group. And what I learned with them was building my own landing pages, and the tech side behind it takes forever. But when I got that to work, I felt like the biggest champion, like, oh my goodness, I can do this. So I prefer that somebody else does that now, because it's can take such a long time and such a long process. But all of these new moments in my business where I was able to utilize certain new technologies in order to be able to get my message out there felt very empowering, because it gave me the ability to not only wear the hat of, dietitian, but it was also made me start thinking. And I think this is very important. It started me thinking as a business owner. Whereas up until that point in time, I was just little me running a private practice. But for the first time, like, I was able to step into the fact that, wow, I'm an entrepreneur. This is my business. And it's more than just a one-on-one connection with somebody sitting across the desk from me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, from expert to entrepreneur and what that journey looked like. And there are so many tools out there. And I think so often we just get really overwhelmed because just deciding like which tools to implement, how to implement them, what to implement first or next, like what's going to activate the lever that should be activated in this moment of time. Like, it's so many questions. And so I think you just mentioned something that's really valuable, which is you sought external help to figure that out, right? Like, here's what it is. I'm a dietitian. I need to do X, Y, and Z. And I think when you're really clear on your goals and what you're trying to achieve, then you can go and figure out what the strategy is and then match the tools to the strategy.
Absolutely. The thing is that everybody's going to give you different advice, because there's so many different tools out there, and different tools work for different people. Like, for example, at the moment, I'm using Thinkific to house my course. And I don't know if I will continue with that. For now, it's simple for me. There was another program that I tried to switch over to before, but I found just the operating, one platform over the other one was a lot more simple for me. And again, like, asking for help, like, there are people who understand the systems. And I think when it's new to you, it can jumble your mind, like exactly, like trying to understand what goes where first, like what do you have to have in place in order to be able to take you to the next step. And I think for me, a lot of it was trial and error in the beginning, and also being exposed to so much from a tech point of view. It took me a while to realize that there was actually a system behind it. So once I think you also understand and you can get that idea of a bigger picture and put everything in the place that it's right for now, and you can always come back and reassess it. So that's where I am right now. I'm busy reassessing, is the way that I've set everything up the most optimized for me, or do I need to make some changes, which is a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, because if something seems to be working, you don't really want to go in and make changes. But I do believe that you need to be able to maybe have those uncomfortable moments of reassessing, because that's really where maybe a next stage of growth can come from.
Absolutely. So often people think I have to arrive. And like when I get there, then that's it. I check it off the list and it's done. But really, building a business is about iterating and seeing what's working and then letting go of the things that aren't working and then making the next iteration. One of the examples that I like to use is like when people are starting their business and they go to build a website. And some of my former clients have built these really expensive, robust websites. And then they're like, oh my gosh, now we have to change everything, right? Because they haven't even built the business. They don't even really know what they're offering and what it looks like and how they're marketing, how they want their marketing to sound and so forth. And so then they go back and feel like they want to redesign everything. Whereas I think if we actually start a little bit slower and take that one step at a time approach, and then know that whatever it is not set in stone. We can always go back and make modifications. And that's what's really, I think, quite liberating about having our own business, right? It's not like, oh, we've done that thing. We always have to do that thing from here on out. No, we get to decide. As business owners, you get to decide every single day what you're going to do and if it's going to be the same thing that you did yesterday. And obviously, consistency is key. But when you're in a point in your business when you are solidifying things and refining things, it's okay to make changes. And actually, I would say it's great to make the changes that are going to further you along towards what it is that you're looking to achieve.
I think it's always important that we're constantly looking to refine things further and further, because with that also builds our own confidence in our business. And then we are able to offer a product, a service to people out there that is the best of us at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about one other topic, Justine, which is how taking care of ourselves, right? You talk about how you've moved your business away from like diet culture and the traditional dieting approach. And I want to talk about how this idea of just focusing in on taking care of ourselves really betters our businesses. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Wow, I could speak forever on this. So let's make it very short and succinct for you. When we are at war with ourselves, within ourselves, when it comes to food and our bodies, we are not able to show up in our lives as the people that we are meant to be. Worrying about our weight, worrying about what we're going to eat today, whether the food that we're going to eat is going to make us gain weight or lose weight, takes up a lot of mental and emotional energy that could be very, very well spent on other areas. Then add to that the fact that as women, we are not only living in isolation generally, not everybody, but we've got families, we are daughters, we are wives, we are mothers, we are sisters, we are friends. And how we relate to ourselves and our own body affects all of those relationships. And of course, affects our businesses as well. So when we want to have good energy, when we want to be able to feel positive about the work that we're doing and what we're putting out there, and feel confident within ourselves, if we are at war inside about what we look like, what our weight is, what we're eating, what we're not eating, maybe we're overeating, maybe we're undereating. All of this drains our energy and stops us from being the people that we really are able to be. The first time I ever worked with myself on moving away from dieting, because I used to count calories and I used to track it in an app and I used to check how many calories I was burning on my Fitbit and all of, and I'd weigh myself in the morning and I'd go for a run and I'd come back and I'd weigh myself afterwards to see if there'd been any difference. I mean, really, like this is what many women experience. My sole focus was on the number on the scale, and I was irritable and ratty with everybody in my life. And when I sat across the desk from somebody who in my practice was struggling or wasn't being able to be as strict with their own eating, I was frustrated with them. And I realized that this wasn't really a recipe for disaster. So I read a book on intuitive eating, which was like a very fearful experience for me, because it was like literally saying, eat whatever you want. If you enjoy those foods, have them. And foods that I loved and always deprived myself of were super scary for me because I'd always overeaten with them. Now I'm allowed to eat them. Does that mean that I'm going to be able to eat a smaller amount? Am I just going to balloon out because now I'm just allowing myself such freedom? But there's a way to it. And I think this is where, for me, the important mindset work came in, of being able to, reframe how I looked at food, how I approached food, so that food became fuel as opposed to a food that was either going to make me lose or gain weight. And I love desserts. For me, that's like I could start a meal with dessert, but I formed a process for myself of really starting to listen into my body to realize what foods were feeling better for me versus not, regardless of what the science said, regardless of what all the social media posts were saying about eat this, don't eat this, this is good for you, this is bad for you. And when I started listening into my own body, so much shifted and changed, because I realized that there were certain foods that, whether they were being told were healthy for me or not, like there's certain vegetables my body just doesn't like. I cannot digest them. And no matter how healthy they are for me, I'm not going to eat them. So it's about realizing what is right for you. And that is what I allowed myself to do. And it gave me the freedom in my own business then to show up with better energy. I would eat food at lunchtime that was delicious and yummy and healthy, but my energy was crashing an hour later, and I didn't have the capacity to sit and consult with clients for the rest of the afternoon. So now my decisions are based on what is going to put me in a good mood, what is going to help me feel as energized as possible and allow me to be me. And I know that sometimes can sound a little bit strange, but that is really what I encourage every single client of mine who works with me to get to, that point that even if I even encourage them to eat a food and they come back to me and say, this doesn't feel good inside me, that's okay. We shift and we change that. So I really believe the ability to make peace with food, to feel comfortable in your body and be able to heal this fractious relationship that we have with food as women is not only beneficial for us, but then allows us to drop all of that worry, all of that fear, all of that energy that we are spending on obsessing over trying to control our weight and our food, and often not being able to succeed, and then everything falling apart as a result, or holding things together to a point, but not really being able to be ourselves in our lives.
Wow. There was so much there. Yeah, I mean, some of what spoke to me and what you just shared was this idea of like when we kind of get rid of the good food, bad food dichotomy, or where we stop referring to foods that way and we start to really nourish ourselves to a point where we're feeding and fueling the energy, then we're also fueling the energy that we then have to show up in our businesses. And then the other thing you said was just listening to our bodies. And I think like the more that we learn to listen to our bodies, and then the more we learn to listen to our own minds and our intuition. And that is so deeply important in our businesses because as we talk about the voices, the inner voices and the outer voices, the more that we can manage those inner voices, because we all have like the mind drama, right? We talk about that a lot on the show. But the more that we can manage those inner voices and use them to actually serve us as opposed to um, stall us or hold us back, then possibility just opens up on a
Absolutely.
whole new level.
There's one point I want to add onto that because I think it'll be so beneficial for everybody who's listening, is that we have those voices. We have them constantly chattering in our head. And I think when you're trying to grow a business, you have them on high volume. You have the one that's dreaming, that wants to like just share all the ideas. And then you have the one that's doubting you, that's like trying to scream and prevent you from doing something that, they don't believe in. And instead of trying to fight with them, drown them out, who's screaming the loudest. I think when we have the ability, you use the word manage, and I like that word as opposed to try and control them. If we can take a step back and observe those different voices inside of us, and this is something that I teach my clients as well, especially when it comes to their relationship with food, because they also have different voices screaming. There's the critical voice, there's the rescuer, there's the child inside of them. When we can take a bit of distance and observe the dialogue, it allows us to disconnect slightly from the intensity of what's going on within us. And then instead of judging those voices, we can be curious about what they're telling us, curious about, the dreamer and what she wants, and curious about the one that is, trying to prevent us from failure and what value she comes to offer. And I think that is so critically important. And we can use this in any part of our lives, that we get so deeply invested in our own thoughts. And one of the best lines I've ever heard, and I love this, is don't believe everything you think. Take a moment to think to yourself or to question yourself of, okay, that thought came in. Where is it taking me? Is it taking me in the right direction? And is it taking me off track? And I think I'm not good at this, but I need to get better at this, is actually journaling some of those thoughts, because when they are ruminating in our head and we have that monkey brain going round and round, it can also drain our energy. It can also make us feel really stuck and frozen in our own businesses. So really to be able to, jot it down, have some awareness, be an observer. And I think also with that, and this is, where the value of having a business coach is so important, is being able to speak it out with somebody who can see things from a different perspective. Or I have a business part of woman that I'm connected with, and we meet like every second week, and we speak out our own, where we are in our own businesses. And it's always that the advice that they give is something I would have given to someone else, but I can't always see it within my own business. So I think it's so important that we have the support that we need also to be able to take account of what we're thinking and channeling it in the most effective way possible.
Definitely. I love that. Don't believe everything you think. It's such a great way to wrap. I do have one final question that I ask all my guests, which is, what is one tip you have for other women in business striving to honor their authentic voice?
Believe in yourself, drown out the noise, and spend some time dreaming of who you want to be, where you want your business to be. Really imagine what your day looks like when you are that person, and implement that now, because that is what will get you to the next step. That is what will help you to feel deeply connected with your vision, with your purpose, with who you are. write it down, and keep coming back to it. And if the vision needs to change, that's great. But really, that is to be able to go inwards and to honor that is the most powerful, powerful way to go.
I love that so much. Justine, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing all of your expertise around diet culture and your wisdom in growing a business and everything that you've learned over the last number of years. It's really been such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. I loved our chat.
Now, if this episode struck a chord or generated an insight for you, I would love it if you would capture it and share it on social media. Don't forget to tag me at Real Impact and also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. With that, keep sharing your voice.